Hello, everybody! So, today we have Dragon Age the Veilguard, the latest entry in the Dragon Age series. Yeah, as I've stated throughout my gameplay, and forget the hair, it just hopped out of the shower, I guess. As I've stated throughout playing the game, the playthrough itself. I mean, I've finished it, it's not finished on my channel. Lords of the Fallen is gonna follow. Again, finished game for 1 month, didn't have the chance to put everything on my channel, but Veilguard today. So, Veilguard, I like the game. I don't think it's an amazing game. I think snubbing it at the Game Award really didn't make much sense because it is better than many entries that were submitted. And yeah, I think it was a good game. I think it was very well made regarding game mechanics, the game itself. It was shipped virtually with no bugs, as opposed to Andromeda, of course. But it lacked in certain situations, or rather not situations, but aspects of it. So let's first talk about what I think was right or done good in the game. Then we can address some criticism and I think the future of the series because that is an interesting topic. So, what I think worked, the gameplay change to an action RPG. It made gameplay so much more interesting. I felt like gameplay, the combat specifically, was pretty bad throughout the series, especially in Origins. I did that. I don't like the fighting system in the Origins. It's outdated, it's kind of crap, and mages are way too overpowered in that game. It doesn't really make sense, it's not enjoyable. The only good thing about it is the tactical screen, but other than the tactical screen, it's trash. So I guess the transition to a new fighting system, making it an ARPG, sort of made sense. Certainly made the game more enjoyable of the face of it, and at least in the beginning of the game. But it kind of became redundant. I think mid game, like I was getting tired of it because you're getting waves and waves and waves of enemies, very reminiscent of a Doom game, or I know, let's say, yeah, let's go with Doom games. And it made little sense by mid game because this should be a story-oriented RPG. You should have the story, right? That is the main focus, not the actual combat. But yeah, they kind of didn't factor that into it, and you're just uh, plastered with waves and waves of the same enemies, just retcon skins, virtually doing the same attacks. It was meh at some point, but I like the change. I like that they tried something new. It certainly worked in early game, but by the mid game, you're just getting tired of it. It was just okay. Let's get through this fight. I guess it doesn't bring any more enjoyment. You only have 4 skills that you can use, 3 regular ones, and an ultimate. Again, that was that was a thing regarding gameplay that I didn't enjoy because the beauty of the games up until now was the vast majority of skills and the vast variety of skills that you can employ in combat, and each skill has its own benefits. It very much um, creates or rather completes your playstyle. In this game, when you're limited to only 4 skills, that doesn't really happen. And I don't know why they decided that. I mean, I know why they decided that. I just didn't care for it that much. But I appreciate that they tried something new and it worked very well in the early game. By mid game, it became sloppy, bad. You already had all the skills that you were using throughout the whole game. There was nothing really to experiment with. And yeah, I think this is about the gameplay change. Um, I said pros and cons. Now we'll do certain elements of the game that I think are worth mentioning. Um, what factors into the whole game change might be also the skill tree. The skill tree is the best that the game has ever seen. You have a very Path of Exile-ish, I want to say, skill tree. It looks very well, it works very well, it really enables you to tailor your character and your game playstyle for some specific parts of the skill tree. I'm trying to make some sense here, but basically you have a huge skill tree. You're never gonna get all the skills or buffs or improvements, but you have to actually pick those that suit your playstyle. And I think that works well in the game. It's, I think, the best skill tree that any BioWare game has ever had. And that is a very good change and a very welcome one. So nothing negative there. It is something long overdue, I feel like, and I like it. I honestly do like it. Now, regarding level progression, we are used to somewhat of an open world feeling to the games. Even in Dragon Age 2, even in Origins, even in Inquisition, it had like an open world approach to everything. This game doesn't. You go into a central hub where you just start missions and go to certain areas that you're free to explore to some extent, yes. But basically everything is mission based. You can travel by yourself, but there's nothing to gain for it, in my personal opinion. Other than Ardathon Forest, I don't think there was anything that warranted too much of exploration. And sometimes you cannot even do exploration because there are some parts of maps that are hidden until some story event, or some side quests or some companion quests. So yeah, I think regarding this whole approach to maps and missions, it felt more like a Mass Effect game than a Dragon Age game. And I think they tried to be innovative here a little bit to enhance the gameplay, but I don't think they nailed that necessarily. Again, I'm very bivalent to that. I both enjoy the experience, but then think about the previous Dragon Age games and see how that takes away the feeling of, immersing yourself into the world. Because that was the thing with Dragon Age 1 to Inquisition. It was super. The games were extremely immersive, especially 2. 2 was the epitome of immersive gameplay. Of course, only talking about Dragon Age series here, not Mass Effect, which is on a whole different level than Dragon Age. But then Veilguard doesn't really have that, and I struggle to immerse myself at times. It has nothing to do with the non-binary stuff or the way they try to modernize the world a little bit, especially mentality-wise. It had most to do with the fact that the characters, Rook specifically, feels like it's not the clean slate of a character that you can mold. They already have their own personality. Like, you cannot really be rude to anybody. You cannot really be, I don't know, expressing your own opinions through the character or your own views of certain events. You're only allowed to express one, maybe two views in different ways. And that I feel is immersion breaking in so many ways. Like, you had Dragon Age Origins where you basically crafted your whole character from the ground up. You had Dragon Age 2, where you had Hawk. He had an identity, but the way he was interacting with the world itself was yours to choose. You weren't forced to go a certain route. In Inquisition, that was tempered a little bit, but still you were allowed to um, basically fully create and manage your own character and the way he interacts with the world. In Veilguard, that is gone. You have Rook, and Rook is his own character. Are you're not only you're not really allowed to change certain aspects about them, or rather interact with the world in a different way than the game wants you to. Only you interact with the world in the way the game wants you to, uh, across several variety of answers, but it's basically the same shit just packaged differently. And I think the game hurts because of that a lot. You cannot put yourself in Rook's position, like you did it with the Grey Warden, with Hawk, with the Inquisitor, and that kind of makes sense. I mean, think about it. You have the three protagonists. They are randomly chosen. They're not recruited by anyone. They are just characters who found themselves in a certain position. You have the Grey Warden who was just tossed into that. It was either that or being dead. You had Hawk who was just trying to survive for his family and help his family survive and strive in Kirkwall. And you had the Inquisitor who was just at the wrong time, at the wrong place, or rather at a good time, at the best place, or something like that. But he was just there, and shit happened, and he was then tossed away in the Inquisition, basically, fighting a demigod, well, a demigod, a blighted Magister. But yeah, here Varric actively recruits you. Like Varric looks at you and says, "Okay, this is a hero. This guy is a hero. We need this hero." So it kind of makes sense that Rook is a good guy, like a super decent guy, a nice guy. He isn't rude. He isn't bad. He cannot be bad because Varric recruited him specifically because of this trait. So yeah, from a story perspective and a game perspective, it makes sense. As a player, myself, who wanted to immerse in the game, that doesn't really sit well. Of course, it's not deterring any fun. I still had a lot of fun with the game because of the companions mostly. The companions are super good. Like at least three of them are amazing for the Dragon Age universe. You have Nev, Balara, and Davrin. These three are great companions, and some of the best companions we ever had in the games. I'm looking at your Origins. In Origins, the companions were, except Morrigan and Alistair and Shale. Let's not forget Shale. Everybody else was meh, and meh is me being kind. I hated everyone else. To be fair, even Ogren. Ogren, though I like what he adds to the game as a character, as a companion, I feel like he is crap. But of course, that's probably only me. Um, so companions are great. These three companions that I've singled out for praise are very well made. They have a lot of depth. They add a lot to the story. And yeah, without them, the game would be bland. But honestly, as a host of companions, like the whole host, I think this is um, the second best host of companions. The first one being, of course, Dragon Age 2. From that perspective, Dragon Age 2 is by far the best game in the series. But I think this really fights with Inquisition for the second one in regards to how companions work and interact with each other. But then again, Inquisition had Iron Bull, it had Josephine, who wasn't really a companion, but she was there. It had Cassandra, Liliana, sort of Liliana. Well, yeah, it's a close call. It's a close call. I liked Now let's talk about the story a little bit, and let's talk about recurring characters because you have Isabella. They butchered the character. It is nothing like the Isabella you come to love in the second game. In the second game, Isabella is such a deep character, very complex, very faceted character. It has a lot of different facets, and it takes a while to understand the character and what she is like. In this game, she doesn't display any of that, but of course, she only makes cameos, so I don't know what to say about that. I loved her in 2. In Veilguard, I was like, let's just get over her, you, Isabella. I'm tired of whatever you have to bring to the table because she doesn't bring anything. She's just eye candy, and that's yeah, that's about it. She was handled poorly. However, Dorian, on the other hand, was handled very well. Spoiler, you can support him to eventually become Archon himself and bring change to the winter, which again, spoiler, and it's very nice. It fits the character very well. It really shows you where he's what he's come to after you finished Inquisition and where you finish his basically quest line in Inquisition. And I think that went very well in trying to get a feeling of where Dorian is at and And he still retained his personality, he still retained his goals, his ambitions. It's still him. You can understand him. You can see him. You can see the same Dorian. With Isabella, you cannot. It's not the same Isabella. It's a very washed down version of her in a lot of sense. I love how they kind of created a relationship between Rook and the Inquisitor. It made sense in so many ways. However, I didn't recognize any of my Inquisitor in the Veilguard Inquisitor. That doesn't make sense. But basically, I created a character. I had my own character in Inquisition that I could roleplay as. That's a different character than the one they introduced here, and I think that went down poorly. What went down poorly is you have nothing from the first two games, like nothing. You have no Grey Warden. Morrigan just pops out, doesn't have any question. Where is the Grey Warden? Where is not Connor? What was his name? Kieran. Where is Kieran? Where is the Grey Warden? Where the fuck is Hawk? Isabella just comes out here, and Hawk is where is Hawk? See, kind of bad. I don't remember if something happens to Hawk in Inquisition, but I don't think so. You see, that's the thing. It seems like whatever you accomplished in one and two don't really account for anything here, which again, one and two were very specific to certain areas of the world, but I think they should at least include some of that. Because it feels like you're doing the fourth game in a series, but with no connection to the first two in regards to player decisions and your investment in the story itself, in the story arc. That was, I think, one of the greatest mistakes they've made. And they've made quite a few. They butchered the Kunari. They're nothing like the Kunari we're used to. Of course, not looking at Origins. Origins handled Kunari very poorly. But in Dragon Age 2, you understood the Kunari. You even understood the Arishok. You saw them. You could relate to them to a certain extent, and you could interact with them. Here, the Kunari are very retconned. Somehow, spoiler, their military branch broke off because of the ambitions of two military leaders, the Dragon King and the Butcher. I love the Butcher. I hated the Dragon King. The Butcher was very well made. In the few sequences he came, he reminded me a little bit about of the Arishok, but only briefly. I think he was a very well made character. In the sense that he wasn't necessarily evil. He came to understand how he could love another city and died protecting it to a certain extent. But that doesn't fit the Kunari system and the beliefs and the way they're virtually indoctrinated since birth. It doesn't make sense to break off because some god, elven god, mind you, shows up and promises you power. It's not the Kunari way. It's not reminiscent of anything Kunari like, or I don't know. I think Dragon Age 2 handled Kunari very well. Dragon Age 3 Inquisition, I mean, handled Kunari well as well. Eh. But Veilguard just wanted a new antagonist alongside the Venatori, and they decided, oh, the Kunari. That's, well, shit. To say the least, that's kind of shitty. It just doesn't make sense for me. Another thing they didn't really nail on was how somehow everybody can be anything in this game. I understand why they're trying to modernize that approach, but I mean, the elves had a social hierarchy. The Kunari had a social hierarchy, and Kunari that left the Qun were super scarce. In this game, it feels like they're everywhere, but in truth, they should be very scarce. They should be. You should find maybe one in Tevinter, in Treviso, in Minrathous, maybe two at most. Not huge scores of them that virtually left the Qun because they grew tired of the Qun. It doesn't work like that. They tried to modernize the world in a sense, but they kind of didn't account to how things were laid out in the first games, and it made sense. It made sense in the first games. You had a lot of personality, and cultures set up. Cultures, world state, and all that crap. Of course, that was very specific to Ferelden and Kirkwall. Uh, but now, even in Inquisition, Inquisition follows the same pathways and the same groundwork laid out in Origins and Dragon Age 2. Oh, but this virtually retcons all of that. Everybody can be anything. The Kunari can always leave the Kyun with no repercussions. No, they're Tal Vashoth. They're hunted down and killed by the Antam, theoretically. And they wouldn't really leave the Kyun that much. They still retain their code of honor, like their indoctrination. Of course, they kind of butchered the Kunari. That's my biggest complaint about the game. Everything else works. Story-wise, I think it's good. It fills out the gaps in some lore. It ties up some loose ends. What I was disappointed in was we only got two gods out of seven or six. However, now except the fact that we don't have all the gods, I feel like uh, the game also lacks a bit in terms of how they retcon the blight. It makes sense. So it makes total sense. There are elements both from Origins and Dragon Age 2 and even Inquisition that allude to the fact that the Evanuris kind of used the blight, and it's not just used by archdemons who are virtually dragons. It's been implied that they lack intelligence, like uh, that level of intelligence. So it makes sense now that the Evanuris were using the Blight to find their own archdemons to continue, to continue the Blights themselves and try to take control of the world, maybe sparking their return. Um, Lore-wise, everything makes sense. I, though I would have loved to explore a little bit more about the Titans, like I would have loved, I don't know, maybe to find a way destroy the blight in the sense that it would make the Titans not tranquil anymore. But by the way, the game kind of fizzled out now is spoiler. The Titans are virtually dead. Their bodies are dead. They live on in the dwarves, and that's about it. Which is meh. I love how they paralyzed the Song of the Stone, which is virtually a dwarven thing, and the song that the Blight gives out. And throughout the game, it also opened up the possibility for some greater threat being out there. Now, this started in Dragon Age Inquisition with the executors, but now Antoine sees something different in the Blight that doesn't really answer to the Evanuris. It's something distinct that can control the Blight that alters their oh their singing a little bit. And that is interesting. And it kind of coupled with the cutscene after the credits, which we'll be talking about in a sec. Um, it kind of makes sense for the future. It kind of opens up the door for a future sequel, which I would love if they managed to return to their writing for the first three games, because that's where they peaked. I mean, I would consider either Origins, Dragon Age 2, or Inquisition to be Game of the Years. I mean, Inquisition actually won Game of the Year, but deservedly so. That game was fucking great. It's probably overall the best Dragon Age game ever made. Veilguard falls short of that, unfortunately. Um, yeah, and they included a post-credit scenes where it kind of alludes. It basically states the fact the animation on that was great. Not like everybody saying, "Oh, it's crap, it's cheap." No, it's fucking great. It's how it's supposed to be. It's how everything was made in Dragon Age 2, for example, or another game, Wukong. After each chapter, you had these type of things, and they work better than just full animation, just eye candy and about that. So I think the narration is done well in the game, very well. And the post-credit scene is virtually alluding to the fact that the executors or some otherworldly force influenced events in the games. It whispered to Logain. It whispered to what was his name? Bertrand? Bertram? No, Bertram is the butler from Jesse. Bertrand, Warwick's brother, and it also whispered to Corypheus. it it is interesting, but it takes a little bit away from the actual culpability or motivations of the villains. Like it makes everything they've done redundant because right now they're not their decisions. They're not what makes them great villains. Because Logain was a great villain. I hated the guy. I still have problems with how he seized control, but that's another story. As a villain, he worked. His motivations were clear. You kind of understood why he did what he did. But now they're trying to say like, oh no, actually these guys manipulated Logain. How? Why would they manipulate Logain? Everything made sense. It actually doesn't make sense that anybody manipulated Logain or Bertrand, or Meredith, or Corypheus, because everything they've done makes complete sense. Of course, they try to do something clever, something smart. They fail short on that as well. It's not smart, it's cheap. I agree with that. I love so the last point before I give this shit a rating. It's not shit, by the way. I'm just it's a good game. I love how the fact that they tie the second game to this point, where the Red Lyrium idol is actually the dagger that Solus used. I think it makes sense. It makes sense that that is the catalyst for the whole series of events that was happening, because you've got to understand, Origins laid the groundwork. Then Dragon Age 2 expanded on that. They didn't expect to make a sequel. And it had such a great success that they were in the position to make sequels and to craft this whole world. And Dragon Age 2 picked up on the groundwork laid by Origins and actually started to expand the lore a lot and create a storyline, because you had Origins. Origins was very generic. Awakening was much better than Origins in terms of storytelling, for example, or a rather more complex plot, because Origins didn't have a complex plot. It was pretty clear. I mean, it was very in your face. It was what made Origins great was how they executed the story, not how complex it was, because it was not complex, but it was extremely well executed. And that was, I think, what laid a very good foundation for the whole series. Like the execution levels of a very simple plot line. Dragon Age 2 expanded on that and opened up the room for the whole series to just happen and the whole storyline to just be there. And culminating with Veilguard, yeah, it is what it is. As a conclusion, I think the game is a very good game. It's not a bad game, it's not a mediocre game, it's a good game. The story itself is the story is very good. The execution lacks in so many ways. They could have handled everything better. They did not. The game was, I think, hurt by 10 years in the making. You retcon a lot of shit in 10 years, and this is the result. A very all over the place story. I mean, no, the general story is very good, but the execution is all over the place. Because there are certain times where the story is very good, other times where it's not good. Overall, it is a good storyline, just executed poorer than it should have. The gameplay is very good. The game itself is well made. It has virtually no bugs. It has no problems. It works very well. Overall, I don't know what to say. It's a good game. It's not a great game. It's not an amazing game. It's nowhere near Game of the Year. I said that it is better than some of the entries in Game of the Year, which is true. It is still better than most of the entries in the Game of the Year awards, but that doesn't speak volumes about anything. Speaks that it just states that RPGs in this year were pretty bad, or rather not. amazing. You have Black Myth Wukong, who was very good, which was very good, but that's about it. Everything else was lackluster, and um, yeah, the game itself is nowhere near the quality of Inquisition, and nowhere near the quality of Dragon Age 2. I feel like, in my personal opinion, I would put Dragon Age Inquisition, Dragon Age 2, Veilguard, and Origins. Or no, Origins third, Veilguard fourth. Uh, even though I love the gameplay and some of the changes, still as a finished product, it's well below Origins. It's not a poor game, it's not a bad game, it's universally hated, and every new Dragon Age entry will be hated. Everybody says, "Oh no, Dragon Age Origins was perfection." It was not. Gameplay was bad. A lot of the things were bad. Story was very simple. There was no way to fuck up that story. But the execution of the story was great, and was perfect even. But yeah, I'm talking about Origins without any add-ons and without DLCs. Vanilla Origins, because you have Awakening, which is a masterpiece in itself. Much better than the base game, in my opinion. I mean, the Architect is a much better villain than all of the villains in Dragon Age Origins combined. So yeah, that's my ranking. Inquisition, Dragon Age 2 Origins, and Veilguard. And to put this shit up the ladder, I will give this an 8 with a somewhat sturdy qualification. See ya. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. See ya.